Well, good afternoon. Potentially, it could still be morning, depending on where you're joining in from. But my name is Jay Johnson, and it is my pleasure to serve as the sponsor and facilitator of today's webinar. I am in the San Antonio, Texas area. Generally, we refer to it as the Central Texas area, and we're so thankful that you've taken time out today. I know the three ladies that are instrumental for putting this thing on. I know their hearts. I know, like, and trust them. And I know that their desire to do this was born solely from a place of wanting to add value to all of you and to create dialogue, to have an opportunity to discuss and share around a topic that we know at times has been, can be, and probably, if we're honest with ourselves, may always be a little bit contentious. But I know that what you're going to hear today is going to be information that at the end of the day, what we're really hoping you will do is just consider. I don't have a vested interest in this. I'm not in this industry.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for
good afternoon.
Webinar this afternoon. It's for folks to join. We have a bunch of people join.
Who is that?
There is a chat box at the bottom of the.
Nobody's crashing at it.
I just silenced whoever they were. So there's some bleed in coming in there, and I'm not sure they were in the right room, or they may be listening to me now going, Jay, I'm in the right room. But listen, I just want you to know that at the end of the day, what Kim and Julie and Kathy, what their goal was, is to create dialogue and share information, have some discussion around it. They're going to share their experiences, their perspectives, and you're going to get to meet and hear from two of the three ladies here in just a minute. But I just wanted to again say thank you for being here, and I am here to serve and assist you throughout this process. And because technology is what it is, we can't ever promise you there won't be hiccups, but I do promise you that I will keep us connected and keep this thing moving along in the most expedient way, but not ever in a way to cause you to not absorb and have an opportunity to process, reflect on, and then ask questions around what's being shared. So I'm going to share my screen real quick because I've got some slides pulled up that we want to share with you today. And so this is, get that to come all the way up. There we go. This is a webinar today being hosted by three ladies, Kathy, Julie, and Kim, again, who just want to talk about have a conversation around independent contractors to employees. And from their perspective, they're sharing it's a great time to make a leap. And so be open-minded, please. And when we get to the Q&A portion, I just ask that when you have a question or a comment, that none of it be personal. Ask it from a place of curiosity. Ask it from a place of what you're wanting answers to. But what we really want to do is make sure that we stay collegial in the conversation today. This is who I am. There's my contact information down at the bottom. Again, I shared with all of you, I'm just outside of San Antonio. I'm a motivational speaker. I spend a lot of time inside companies and organizations training. I had the pleasure of speaking at the Texas Pet Sitters Conference back in February, and that's how I met these three incredible ladies. And I've had an amazing last couple months as I've gotten to meet many of you now through some online activities that we've been doing, and I just so appreciate what you do. I am a huge advocate for what you do and a receiver. I'm a client.
Yay!
I am going to figure out where that's coming from. Okay, this is Kathy Vaughn. Everybody, I want you to know that she is one of the three ladies that is responsible for organizing today's event.
Here we go.
I'm looking, everybody. Forgive me.
Here we go.
I found it. Okay. Kathy had a she's got some family priorities that pulled her away last minute. She can't be here. I don't want to share, her business, but can I just say that if we can lift her and her family in prayers, I think if you're the praying type, or if positive energy and good thoughts, I know she would be very much appreciative of you sending those her way. This is Julie, and Julie is on with us. Julie, can you unmute? I'd like to ask you a few questions. As one of the organizers and one of the ladies responsible for bringing some information today, Julie, would you mind just sharing with everybody who is joining us this afternoon what your experience is in the industry, how many years, where you're located, those kinds of things?
Sure. My business is the Pet Sitter Boise. Can you hear me all right?
Absolutely.
Okay. I have a pet sitting business in Boise, Idaho. And I have, well, right now I don't have that many employees, but last year I think it topped out at about 54 employees. I kind of hover around like the high 30s employees. So the end of last year I had about 37 employees. I started with independent contractors in 2003. I switched to employees in 2014. It was a very scary experience, but it's probably the best decision I made in my business. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to share with you guys too.
Thank you.
Anything else? I'm not sure.
Yeah, thank you for that, Julie. We really appreciate that. It's now my pleasure to also introduce to you one of our other hosts for today, Kim Tank. And Kim, please unmute, and I'd love for you just to share a little bit around the same kind of questions. How long in the industry, where you're at, and the kinds of things that you service and do.
Sure. I started my business in 1990, and I hired my first employee in 1996. I went right into employees from the beginning. I'm really not that large. I currently have 6 people on staff, only one of whom is working at the moment. And we are primarily deal with traveling clients. We do dog walking, but it's not the focus of our business. We're mostly travelers. And about 4 years ago, I actually moved out of the area. I live 2 hours away from my service area, which is in the San Francisco Bay Area. I live in Pollock Pines, California, so that I can have baby goats. Pretty much.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. I took us out of the slide view only because I wanted people to be able to see you on a larger screen. Julie, I'm sorry I didn't do that for you. And I also can't see the waiting room as people are joining, so I had to back out here just to let a few others in. So good that everybody's joining us. I'm going to pull the slides back up now, and then
Okay.
once I get those up, I will turn it over to you.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Ladies, it's all yours.
All righty. So let's talk about, we like to refer to this as the elephant in the room. It is a contentious topic among many pet sitters. And we're just going to get it out there and talk about it. And I know it's a pretty blatant statement. I've got it written right there. Independent contractors don't work for the pet sitting business model. The reason we say that is if you look at, when I look back at the number of people I've talked to about hiring for the first time, one of their major concerns was, I don't want to give up control of having other people do the work for me. And yet, when it came time to hire, many people chose ICs rather than employees. And just to be perfectly honest, you gave up more control with your ICs than you did with employees. So there seems to be a disconnect with the needs of the business versus what we end up doing. So really, when most pet sitters are concerned with control, employees are going to be the way to go for that. So if we look at the next slide, we have the government's view of employee relationships. I specifically put here some factors of the ABC test. Now, let me back up a little bit. Previously, all states used the 20-factor test. Now, more states are moving to the ABC test to test whether one is an IC or an employee. California notably has the most strict of the prongs on the ABC test. I'll explain these in a second, but if you look at the B prong, California doesn't even have that it's, they take out the performed off-site portion. California says if the work takes place as the usual course of the business, that person performing it's an employee. So what that says is that any pet sitting company, a pet sitter would be an employee. No ifs, ands, or buts. But to back up and look at the ABC test, prong A talks about free from control. There's a lot of interpretation possible there. So, you know, control is kind of an arbitrary word to use, but it has a lot to do with the control and how the work and the timing and the scheduling. The B prong is that sticking point of the ABC test that has made more companies examine whether they have employees, because again, it's addressing the core work of your business. It's saying that you should use contractors for work that's outside your usual course, which means if I have an employee manual I want printed, or I have my office painted, those would be contractor things. But anybody who's actually performing pet sitting, because I'm a pet sitter, those are the employees. And generally, and the C prong is just emphasizing that the worker has their own business. They really do need to come to you with the prior business before, not one that you create after to hold up the IC definition. So if we look ahead here, I have a quote on the next slide about the Internal Revenue Service. What this is saying is that they're really looking for employees, and that if you don't have an employee, it's up to you to prove that it's not an employee. So the onus is really on you. The bottom line is, if you've got an employee, the IRS is never going to come looking for you to have anything else. If you've got a contractor, they may very well do that. No one is going to come after people's employees and insist that they convert the other direction, but they may very well insist that you convert a contractor to an employee. So if we're going to look at the big picture of the agencies that are controlling us, we have to keep in mind that these are the people that are going to come after us if we don't do it correctly.
We talk about converting contractors to employees, not.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't quite catch that. If you have a question, we will address that as we go along here. Our next couple slides here, Jake, we have one, don't stick your head in the sand. It's time now to take a look at it, because it's becoming more and more, more states are following California's lead. Some are very strict. Massachusetts is one, I believe New Jersey is another. And there are about 23 states, I think, out of 50 that use some form of the ABC test. So the times are coming around. So it's important to take a look. Oops, lost something on my computer. If we can just move to the next one. So the bottom line here is we're not going to continue to talk too much about why you should convert, but just one final thought, because we're going to go into, well, we're going to talk a little bit about the myths, but we consider it the gold standard of running a team, because who isn't concerned with the quality of the work and who performs the work and when they perform the work? These are all things that are really important to running a pet sitting business. So when you look at the abilities that you have with employees versus the limitations you have with contractors, we just really think this is the gold standard. This is what people, the kind of control that most people want when they are running their business. So I'm going to turn it over to Julie, and she's going to start talking about some of the myths and preconceptions that you might have.
Julie?
Thanks, Kim. Okay, so do we do the slides ourselves, Jay, or do you move them?
I've got them.
Okay. So is that the next slide? Yeah, okay. The 7 myths that we're just gonna go over some myths, and they are, it costs too much to have employees. If I switch from ICs to employees, I will get flagged for an audit. People are afraid of that. I was afraid of that. Payroll processing is too expensive. So we're gonna go over, in fact, I just switched payroll companies so I can give you some insight on that. And Kim has actually, bless her heart, done payroll by hand, which is free. And then my rates will have to go up. I will have to pay my sitters less, and they won't want to transition. My clients and staff don't care how I classify my staff, and I don't have enough work or volume for employees. So next slide. Okay. It costs too much to have employees. So the bottom line is it costs about 20% beyond, like if you pay somebody $10, it's going to be another $2 on top of that. So $12 for a half-hour visit or something, you know, like $10, and your cost is $2 more. And the thing I had to balance was, is it, you know, do I pay that, or do I not sleep at night wondering if I'm going to get caught by the Labor Department or IRS? So from what I understand from other people who've been through this, those can get kind of expensive, the misclassification audits. So those are what you have to consider. Next myth. Okay. I will get flagged for an audit. Okay, so when I transferred to employees, I participated in the IRS Voluntary Classification Settlement Program. What that is, it's, the IRS really does want people to move from independent contractors to employees. So this is kind of like, okay, we're gonna make it easy for you. We're gonna give you a pass, but we're gonna charge you for it. So at the time I switched, my payroll was $50,000 a year, and I those are all the people I was keeping. If you have some that you're not going to keep, I think you don't include them in your estimate. But so for a $50,000 payroll, if you're in this program, it's a $500 fee. It's like 1%. So in exchange for signing up for the program, they will promise not to audit you and just let's all move forward, kind of thing.
Excuse me.
What's that?
Can we ask questions now, or should we wait to the end?
Sure. I'm sorry. What, do you have a question, Gus?
Sure. Is this so this process that you're talking about? I've looked it up previously.
Mm-hmm.
So this audit basically, they will help decide whether you should use contractors or employees. Correct? It's not an automatic. They're going to tell you to convert to. They may say that you have legitimate contractors.
I think, I don't know about that, but they can reject you from the program. So I don't know what their criteria is, but everyone I've known that's done it has just breezed through. It takes about a month or two for them to say, yeah, we'll let you be part of this.
Oh, well, what you're saying sounds sort of like a safe harbor, like where you're using them incorrectly, and so then you agree to classify them as employees, and then they won't ding you, and you pay this money, and then you get everything shifted over, and you're fine. But what I understand, there's an IRS program where they will come in and sort of do an audit, an on-the-spot audit, and determine if you're using them correctly, so that you won't get future audited. Is that not correct?
I'm not aware of that, but yeah, do you know, Kim?
Can I jump in for a second, Julie?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I think there's a form you can file. It might be called the SS8. Please don't quote me on that, but where you can send in a form and they'll determine whether you have employees or contractors. That might be what you're referring to.
Yeah. Maybe that is. And what was that called?
I think it's called an SS8. I haven't had a chance to look it up. I mean, it's off the top of my head. That may be what it's called.
I won't hold you to it. Thank you, though.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just want to point out too that it is a voluntary, the thing I'm talking about, the VCSP, it is voluntary, and you have to determine what your risk tolerance is. I know lots of people who didn't even know about it, and they just switched and nothing ever happened. So, and I also know somebody who was in the middle of an audit and they let her join at that point. So I guess it depends on the whole situation. So
I have a question too.
sure.
Okay, so if you do the VCSP, how does that handle the state coming after you?
Yeah, so it's only the IRS. When I was looking into it, somebody, I don't know who told me, said usually the state will follow the IRS lead. Now that's a really good question, because what I understand, I don't want to say most, but a lot of people where they get in trouble is when they have an independent contractor apply for unemployment. And they might not even do it intentionally. They might have like a full-time job they lost, and then they have to like put other jobs, and they say, oh yeah, I work there too. Not even thinking that, no, I work for myself. I don't work there. So but the Labor Department doesn't have any kind of program like this as far as I know. So it's not going to cover everything. It's just one piece of it. So, there's always a risk, but I think the risk is less if you just get it over with, and, you can join the BCSP for the IRS part, but I think moving to employees overall, in my opinion, is your lowest risk. But anyway, okay. It is always better to initiate conversion than waiting for them to find you. That's kind of what I just said. Unemployment and workers' comp are more likely to get flagged. So what happened to me, I'll try to give a few examples. I could tell stories all day, and you guys can too, I'm sure. But I had an independent contractor. She was my top person. She contracted with me for 7 years, and she got scratched on her eyelid. Thank God it wasn't her eye, but a cat. She got her face in front of a cat, and it did a Z on her eyelid. First thing she did was call me and say, "Who's paying for this, you or do you want me to contact the client?" And I said, "Well, you're an independent contractor. You have your own health insurance." She's like, "I'm not paying for it." And I was like, wow. And you have to, I wasn't her employer. So I basically just had to sit back. I didn't know it was a gray area. Thankfully, she's not the brightest person. She went home and put Neosporin on it. She should have had stitches, but she took care of it. But it just kind of freaked me out, because it could have been her eye, and then I could have been sued, or the client, I don't know. So there's something to think about. I don't want to scare you guys, but that's kind of what scared me, and where I think I could have gotten in some trouble there.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So as far as I understand, either, and I might be wrong, correct me if I am, please, but either if you have ICs or employees, you as an owner of a pet business company, you should have workers comp.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? And in case that your staff member suffers from an accident during the work hours, which happened to your person, you are supposed to cover that, right?
Yes. And that's why as employees I have workers comp. And I as independent, I fought really hard to keep independent contractors. I don't know why. I just thought it was good. So I talked to my insurance guy. I go, "Hey, can I get workers comp on my independent contractors?" He's like, "Yeah, you can." And it was the same price. And what happens is if somebody got hurt, it's a backdoor kind of thing where they have to sue you, and they have to prove that they were really a misclassified employee, and then they would get it. And I was like, well, I'm going to pay for workers' comp insurance anyway, then I may as well just have employees. So
The law where I live is that workers comp you have to provide workers comp for everybody who does any part of the work for your business or prove that they have workers compensation insurance of their own. So regardless of it's me or as the owner or volunteers or interns or employees or ICs or whatever, we have to have workers comp to cover everyone.
And that's a good point, because an independent contractor, I have a competitor we're friendly, and she got into an audit with the labor department, and they said, well, you can keep independent contractors, but they have to have their own workers' comp insurance and their liability insurance. And so you can get a personal workers' comp policy. My experience with the independent contractors I had is they didn't even want to spend $10 to buy poop bags, much less insurance and workers' comp. They wanted to be employees from that standpoint.
I think there's a law where I live that says that because of the law, the insurance company that I use specifically offers it to cover contractors here, where they don't necessarily offer it in every state.
I gotcha. Yeah, every situation is going to be different. I don't, for sure, this is like my experience and my opinion. So please keep that in mind.
Hey, Julie. It's Jay. So, for everybody that's asking questions, that's absolutely what they want. I also want to just let you know there's some questions and comments being posted in the chat. So everybody, if you see something lighting up in the chat, blinking orange or something, please go there to see. But I think once we move past this slide, Julie, and we go to myth 3, what I would ask everybody to do is wait till the speakers have gotten through all the points on that slide. And before we transition, I promise I'll say, does anyone have any questions? That we bring them all in. But Julie, there's a couple comments and questions like Nancy Gray asked in the chat. Do you have to go through the VCSP program, or can you just start switching over?
You can, it's totally voluntary. You can just switch over. It's just kind of a deal you make with the IRS that they're not going to audit you. So it's like a risk thing. If I had just had like one independent contractor, I probably wouldn't have bothered. But I had 11, and I don't know. By that point, I was just kind of getting freaked out, and I just wanted to minimize my risk. So that's why I did it.
Yeah. And then Jessica Davis here locally in the Texas area, she shared a link for everybody that talks about the government, that talks about the VCSP. So you've got that out there. And then Linda Grunfeld, I hope I said your name right. She asked, if you do the VCSP, how does it affect state audits? And I think that's the point we were just addressing.
Yeah, we addressed that.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. So then there's a thing early in the year. So there's some people say, well, I should switch January 1st because if you have 1099s and W-2s, it might flag an audit. I would tend to think, yes, that could be true. I'm not an expert. I switched in February. I ended up having 2 people that had made over $600 by then, and I did give them 1099s. So at the end of the year, I had about 20 W-2s and 2 1099s. But then again, I was part of I also signed up for the VCSP. But the state never said anything. So I can't really speak much to that, but I think, and Kim and I were talking, this is a really great time to do it because we're a downtime and the startup's probably not going to happen overnight. So if you have some ICs that are like, I don't want to switch, you have time to get your employee handbook together and all your ducks in a row, and you have time to hire some employees to replace the ICs that aren't coming along for the ride. 2, I had 11 ICs, 2 did not come along, and 1 wanted to start her own business, and I didn't want competitors. The other one had some credit card debt, and she didn't want her wages garnished. And, as an IC, they couldn't garnish her wages, but as an employee, they could. So, but everybody else, if you present it right, and you know, they were really reasonable and they wanted to be part of the solution. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. So I already went over the last step.
Any questions from anyone else
Yeah,
before
any
we
questions?
transition? Okay.
Okay, payroll processing is too expensive. So I personally like the options that are out there. There's Gusto, Paychecks, QuickBooks Payroll, or Intuit Payroll, and others. There's just a lot of them. QuickBooks Payroll, their basic plan is probably the cheapest, but don't quote me on that, or Intuit Payroll. I liked it. What it does is it calculates all the taxes. You just put in like their pay rate and stuff, and I use Time to Pet, and Time to Pet has like a list of the jobs they did and the rates. I pay piecework, and then you just plug that into it, and it takes care of everything, including direct deposit, which I use Chase Bank, and they don't charge anything for the direct deposit into the sitters' bank accounts. So the cost ranges from about $35 to $45 a month for your base rate, and then it ranges from about actually like $2. I think I pay $2 an employee because I have so many, to about $6 per employee per month, or it can be per pay period or per month. So I know like QuickBooks Payroll, you could pay them every week and it was just one rate. With Paychecks, which is what I have now, you pay them you have to pay, like I pay $2 per employee per pay period, plus I think it's like $40 a month for the, just for the base, the fixed cost. But anyway, so in the next slide, we're going to get into Kim's part. She knows how to do it herself.
Were there any questions on myth 3?
HR packages with payroll, Linda. I actually do have an HR package, sort of. There's like different levels. It really hasn't come in too handy for me, but if you need a employee manual or something, they do have like employee manual builders and stuff, employee handbook. I'm happy to help with that. If you send me a message, I can help you with your handbook too.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Moving on to myth 4. Oh, myth 3A, sorry.
Myth 3A. Okay. I'm addressing this because when I started out, I had one employee who worked a few hours a month, and I was not prepared to spend any money on doing payroll at all. So what I did was, I like numbers anyway. I hired a bookkeeper to consult with for an hour before I hired my first employee. And I wanted her to teach me the process, the steps, what I needed to deduct from each paycheck, how I needed to keep track of that, and where I needed to send the money. I think I spent, this was a long time ago, $50 for an hour, and she walked me through it, and I realized this was something I could do. So with 1 or 2 employees, if you want to dip your toes in the water and you're not quite prepared to go full on with the payroll service, it's possible to do it yourself. I also attended a great seminar put on by the IRS and the EDD, which is California's Employment Department, and it was a new employer seminar, and they walked us through everything. They also did a lot on IC versus employee, which is where I got my foundation for this back in 1996. But one of the great benefits of doing payroll yourself is that you have an understanding of where the money goes, so that when your payroll is $500 a year, you make a little mistake or you don't plan right, you're a few dollars off. When it gets up to $60,000 a year, you don't want to be making mistakes because they're amplified. You have a much greater payroll. So it helps you plan for future tax liabilities if you've done it yourself. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about that. If not, I'm going to turn it back over to Julie, and she's going to keep working through the myths.
My payroll company, I did a lot of research and then consulted with a lawyer and an accountant. And I don't know whether to hold my questions to the end or whatnot. I certainly don't want to interrupt. But like my payroll company has insurance for miscalculation and things of that nature.
Oh,
Workers'
yes. I mean, one advantage to using a payroll company is that if they make a mistake, yes, it's often on them. So I no longer do payroll myself, but I highly recommend it in the very beginning when you have 1 or 2 employees and you're trying to keep your expenses down because you're not making a lot of profit from it yet. And
Yeah.
then transition later on. You know.
What I like about the payroll company is, they pay all your taxes, they take it out of your account, of course. And then they send the W-2s out at the end of the year. They're accountable if there's a mistake made.
The payroll company does all that for my ICs too.
Yeah, okay.
That's awesome.
That's great. Yeah.
I mean, the 1099s, not the W-2s, obviously.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm sorry, I keep interjecting here, and I'm going to try to shut up, but I actually came here to try and be convinced to switch to employees. I've had contractors for since 2006, and when I started my company, and I've been through a lot of this from that you're going over. So I'm going to try and shut up, but I want to be convinced that I should switch to employees because I'm not.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We'll work through this, and then we'd be happy to address that, I think, down the line towards the end, because
Okay.
I'd love to talk to you about that. So
I feel like there are reasons why contractors are still a better choice that have nothing to do with finances, which is what most of I hear about. There's sort of this presumption that people are choosing contractors because they're trying to get over or they're trying to escape paying workers' comp. That's simply not the case because I pay for workers' comp. So so in any case, I'll shut up and listen.
No.
okay. We'll get back to that.
Yeah.
Hey Gus, this is Jay. Look, I think there's value add, right? When we talk about stepping into this time and space to have dialogue, I think dialogue has to happen, and your view and perspective is going to be helpful to everyone. So thank you for what you've been bringing.
Oh, sure, I will save it there till the end. Bye.
You'll see. There are some things that aren't perfect about employees. You'll see in the presentation. So.
Thank you, though, Gus. We appreciate you.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so myth 4: my rates will have to go up. So, slightly adjusting pay is one way you can pay for the extra 20% of the employee expenses. So normally people who have IC, like the ICs, negotiate a percentage. So like in my example, a 30-minute visit is $20 for the client. The IC, most people pay about 60%, I think, or even more. So that'd be $12, and you don't have employee expenses. So your gross profit after tax, before taxes, is $8. With employees, what I did, this is just what I did. I paid the new employees. I actually kept the people transitioning over. I was really nice, and I paid them. I just kept paying them the same rate. I just had to eat it for a while. But the new people I brought on at $10, and then the $2, it was the same since I just shifted the pay here. Paid them less, and I was able to find employees a lot easier. It was really getting hard for me to find independent contractors. So, but I could find employees at the time a lot easier. Now that was in 2014, things changed. So I will acknowledge that. But that's how I did it. I just shifted their pay, and then later on I went to $25 for a visit. And you know, with an IC, they just keep getting the 60%. So you actually make more if you're paying $10 for an employee. But anyway, I'm getting off track here. So do you have anything to add to that, Kim?
No, I mean, obviously these are kind of general terms. I mean, it's not gonna be the same for everybody, but that's an example of why it's not necessarily more expensive. It doesn't have to be. Now, obviously, we have to, we'll address some of the things later on that we have to talk about, like minimum wage.
Okay, next.
Good.
Sorry. Okay. I will have to pay my sitters less. They won't want to transition. So like I said, I paid them the same, and now I only have 2 of my original people after 6 years. But they may be very willing in light to take a little bit less pay. You can negotiate them with them because you're paying half. Now they only pay half of their FICA taxes. You pay the other half. You withhold their taxes, limiting their liability in April. And they're covered under workers' comp. That's a big benefit. And like I said, it's how you sell it to them. Like, it's important. And also the unemployment insurance. Well, in this pandemic, independent contractors are getting unemployment insurance as well, but that's not really normal, I don't think. Plus they get training and pay for all their training and work. There's open communication. You can coach and train. So my people, 9 of the 11 were fine with it, and it turned out to be a good deal, and they were happy with it afterwards, and they're happy now, the ones that are left. So, and the new ones. Okay, next slide.
There's a couple questions real quick.
Okay.
Go ahead.
well,
Somebody's going to ask, I think.
No, I was gonna say that Susan asked, what is it better to pay hourly or by rate? By
We're getting to that. We're going to get to that soon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I pay piecework, but yeah, we have a whole section on that coming up. So, okay. Okay. My clients and staff don't care how I classify staff. They're your workers. They're covered by workers' comp while in the home, or they care that your workers are. My clients do. When I'm onboarding a new client, I actually purposely raise my rates because I felt like I had a better product with the employees. And when people would call, they would gasp when I told them my rates. I'd say, well, the difference is we have employees, so they're covered. There's less liability to you because we have workers' comp, and we train them and all this, right? And they do understand that. They understand that. Oh, I was surprised how many people knew the difference. And the first year I switched to employees, I raised my rates. And I was like, kind of felt like if I don't make it on this, I don't care. I'm doing it this way. And my business grew 40% that year. So it didn't seem to matter. It didn't seem to affect me negatively. So let's see. Okay, yep, I think that's it for that one. I don't have to pay, or I don't have enough work to have employees. You can have some of my employees don't even work every pay period. My philosophy is to have lots of part-time employees and work, because I feel like when I did have like full-time people in the beginning, and they burned out, and if somebody went on vacation, I'd have to pick up the slack, and I was running all over. So I just like to have part-time people working for supplemental income. And so sometimes there's no work in their area and they're fine with it. And yeah, you don't have to have a fixed schedule. It can be completely random. That doesn't have anything to do with the qualification to have employees. Is that the right word? So, okay, next slide.
I think that's me.
Yeah, I think Kim's next.
Oh, no,
it's me. Okay.
It's you.
Hang with me for a little longer. So now we're past that. Now, when I switched employees, I was scared to death. I didn't know what to do, like what the steps were. So I'm just going to show you, if you want to switch to employees, the steps to go through. Next one. Okay, so this is a checklist, and if anybody wants links, I have links to all these things. It's like a checklist almost. The first, you have to get an EIN if you don't already have one. Well, employee ID number. You have to register with your state labor department. Register with the IRS for payroll taxes. It's called EFTPS, Electronic Federal Tax Payment System. Consider a voluntary classification settlement program with the IRS. You sign up your new employees in the state. It's the labor department. You just put in, you have to register them. And the reason for that is a lot of things, but like if somebody had wage garnishment or something, and they use it for unemployment insurance tracking and stuff like that. E-Verify registration, workers' comp, you can get that through your payroll company or business insurers of the Carolinas, and there's some other places, or a local agent. Unemployment insurance, get that through your labor department. It's just, is that how it is in California, Kim?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and it's quarterly, and it's about 1% in my state anyway. Workplace posters, you just send them the links to their typical, this is your minimum wage thing. Set up your payroll system and create and use an employee handbook. That's it. Those things will get you going.
So there's a question in the chat for you, Julie.
Sure. Okay, let's see. Split shifts. Yeah, when I get a new client, we tell them that we work on a team and they will have a primary sitter, but that we don't promise that. And the reason is because our sitters have work-life balance. They go on vacations. They don't want to work morning, noon, and night. So a lot of times we'll have like one person do mornings and afternoons, another person do evenings. And if they're not fine with that, they're not our client. But most people, if you explain it right, I would say 80% of the people are okay with that. We're not going to be everything to everybody. And you can't expect the person to work 24/7, 365.
I think she was referring to the split shift pay if you have somebody on a split shift during the day, which I can address that.
Okay. Yeah, mine is completely piecework, but Kim will get into that.
I can try to, if I don't get to it when we're talking about pay, let's bring it up at the end because I can address that.
The posters are free from the labor department. The links are there too. Since they don't come to my house to work, I just give them the links and that's all. Let's see. Do you do all this before? Yes, I did all of this before I have employees. You get set up, and then as you get employees, you put them in the new hire registration system. So, but yeah, I got all this set up before I had an employee. So.
And I know that number 11 there in your checklist, Julie and Kim, it talks about creating and using an employee handbook. I just wanted everybody to know, depending on which payroll system you choose to go with, and I'm not promoting one over any of the others, I just have a little familiarity with one. Paychex actually has employee handbooks built into their system, and you can kind of tailor and create what you need inside of what you already get with them. So I just thought I'd share that.
Yeah, and it's a living document, so just know that it's always changing as you think of things.
That's right.
Okay, I think this is Kim's turn.
So we're going to talk a little bit about, everyone's like, well, how do I figure out how to pay people? I'm used to just, if I've used ICs, maybe we did it, percentage or flat rate, or there's a few key points you need to keep in mind. And this is kind of some homework you would need to do. You need to know how many visits per hour one sitter does on average. Now, that could be one visit if say you're providing 45-minute visits and you have an average travel time of about 15 minutes, they're only going to get one done per hour. If you offer 20-minute visits and there's a 10-minute drive time on average between the two, you're probably getting 2 per hour. My business runs between 1 1/3 and 1 1/2 per hour. And I know that, and it's important to know that because I need to know how much profit I'm generating and how much I can afford to pay out in payroll. So you need to know what your charges generated are for 1 hour, and that's based on how many visits you're doing and what your average visit fee is. I have one fee for all my visits, so it's pretty easy. You also want to factor in what's the average number of miles driven one way to various visits, because we're going to talk a little bit about mileage pay down the line, but that's compensable time. When your employees are driving between visits, that's time that they are working. Until you can beam me up, Scotty, to the next visit, they have to drive their car, and that is work. It's only in between the visits. It's not the first visit of the shift nor the last visit home. And then the other thing you need to know is what the minimum wage in your area is, and it's not always that simple. In California, different counties have different minimum wages, and sometimes it's based on how many employees you have. So before I go to the next one, are there any questions on that?
There's a question by Laura about meeting a couple sitters and myself at the meet and greet. So what I do is I charge a $25 registration fee, and that includes the meet and greet with the primary sitter. I do assign a primary sitter. They get a lockbox and they get set up in time to pet. And that covers that. If they want to meet additional sitters, it's $15 per sitter. And I just explain that they're employees and we pay them for their time. And honestly, most people, after they meet like 2 sitters, they're like, oh, they're all really good. They're great. And everything's in time to pet, and they get a message. So I personally haven't had problems with that. Like I said, if they're a client that wants to meet everyone that's going to be in their home, they're probably not going to be our client. But we can't, we're not for everyone. So.
Okay. So we can go ahead to the next slide. Some things to keep in mind when you consider pay too. Okay. So as I mentioned before, you have to pay at least minimum wage for all the hours worked. And I'm sure you're thinking, well, I don't want to just pay minimum wage. And no, either do I. But there's some key points to keep in mind because, again, and I want to emphasize, this is regardless how you calculate the wages. It doesn't matter how you pay, whether you pay flat rate, percentage, or by the hour, you still have to meet all the wage and hour laws. So paying piecemeal doesn't relieve you of any of that. So in essence, you really do need to know how long your people are working. You can't ignore that fact that just because you're paying them by piecemeal. You have to meet at least minimum wage for all the time work, including the drive time, as I mentioned before. So in other words, let's just say minimum wage is $10 and you're going, oh, okay, I can pay them $5 for a 30-minute visit. But it takes longer than an hour to do 2 30-minute visits because you're driving. So someone who's spending 20 minutes of that hour driving is only, and you're paying them $5 per visit, is only making about $7.50 an hour. So you have to really take in consideration their drive time in between the visits. And then I also want to mention that some states require you pay mileage for your employees and some don't, okay? But the bottom line is, and we're gonna go to the next slide now. I just wanna explain this. The bottom line is, if they're driving and they're using their car and it's causing them expense, you have to make sure they make at least minimum wage plus that expense. This comes back from a Domino's pizza ruling a few years ago where their delivery drivers realized that by the time they paid for all their gas and everything, they weren't making minimum wage. You don't want to have it so that they can make more money working at McDonald's, because at McDonald's, when they go there and they make minimum wage, they just sit there all day and they have to drive their car. You must keep in mind that your employees are driving their car. So what you want to do is you need to make sure that you're paying you have to figure out about what your average distance is going to be, so that you make sure you compensate your sitters enough to cover the average number of miles they're going. And I will tell you, and I mentioned this later on too, is that you're really better off, since you have to pay them high enough to compensate for that, you're far better off doing it as a separate reimbursement than paying higher wages. And I'll just give you a quick example. Say minimum wage is $10 and you figure out they spend about $3 an hour on driving. So you could say, well, I'll pay them $13 an hour. And I'm never advocating only paying minimum wage. I'm using this purely as examples so that you meet the law. You'd be far better off paying them $10 an hour and a $3 reimbursement on their check, because the $3 would not be taxable to you or to them, nor would it be figured in your workers' comp total. So you would save a lot of money. My sitters make only just a little bit over minimum wage, but they make quite a bit in their mileage pay. Their check, it's all on the same check. It's just not taxable. It's a separate line item on their pay stub. So that's, and if anyone has any questions, because I know it sounds very confusing, I'm really happy to talk to people about that afterwards. So, and I can take a couple quick questions if you like, otherwise we will move on.
Do you see Gus's comment?
No, I didn't see that. Mine aren't staying up for very long.
Says you might also be in a position where staff are doing multiple dog walks in an hour. They would therefore be making potentially $20 an hour. That pay is averaged and may compensate for times that they are spent traveling and may be dipping below.
Right, and I'm not saying that you absolutely have to kick out a separate payment for mileage, but you need to make sure that when you average it out that you are covering that. And I'm just pointing out the advantage to paying it as a reimbursement. You save a lot of money on taxes. So again, I can answer any questions if anyone has any specific numbers they want to throw at me. I'm going to move ahead to determining method of pay. And I know this slide is very small. It's a little bit hard to read. I'm going to go through it. So with employees, you have a lot of choices. You can pay them percentage. You can pay them flat rate. You can pay them by the hour. The only thing you have to make sure you do is meet minimum wage and hour standards and overtime laws and that sort of thing. So I just made a little chart here on some of the pros and cons. So if you're paying by percentage, that's probably the easiest to do for you if you do have per pet charges, or you have some visits that you charge different rates because they're longer. It makes it very simple to pay by percentage. But one of the cons of paying by percentage is that sitters get an automatic raise when your rates go up, and you may not want that. They also know what all your charges are. Not that sitter can't find out anytime what you charge, but they're just very aware of what your charges are in relation to what they make. And one of the cons is also you still have to really track hours to make sure that you're meeting all these wage and hour standards. And it's harder to track when you're paying by percentage. It's a little bit more difficult if you have them do something extra for you, like pick up a key or where you're not charging for that. And anytime someone's paid by percentage, there could be a motivation to cut a visit short. I'm just saying there's always the possibility on that with anything. If you do flat rate, it's probably the easiest to do payroll of all, because you just, hey, they did 20 visits and it's $10 a visit. That's $200. It's pretty simple. But again, you may still have to track hours to make sure that you meet minimum wage anyway. And again, with this method, it's a little harder to track extra errands that they run, things that you don't charge for. And there can always be a motivation, again, to cut visits short. And I know I'm going to sound biased here. I've actually moved to paying by the hour. And the reasons here are when people are coming on board to work for you, I think most people are looking at a job. They want to know how much I'm making per hour. It's easiest, it's simple, you're making X dollars per hour. It automatically ensures that I'm meeting minimum wage standards, and everything is tracked and paid for. For example, they go pick up a key, they're already in the neighborhood, it takes 2 minutes. it added 2 minutes onto their time. But I don't have to sit and figure, what am I going to give them because they're flat rate? What am I going to give them for picking up that key for me? Maybe nothing at all. But in this way, mine everything is paid for. It eliminates issues with things that might take longer. If they have extra cleanup that's 15 minutes long, whether I charge the client or not, I want to pay my sitters for that. And it's really easy because I just use their time card. And it's easier to figure out if there's any overtime, which is rare, but we occasionally have overtime. The cons of paying by the hour is you do have to really track all of their time. However, you has, depending on your state, you may have to track those hours anyway. I keep saying track hours. Most states do want to know when your employees are working. It's really important to have those records if there's any kind of dispute. So tracking hours is something that really everyone needs to do regardless of method of payment. Oh, and whoops. And, but the cons of paying by the hour, it does take me longer to do payroll than it used to, a lot longer. But I'm getting better at it. And some people bring this up, the staff might be motivated to stay longer than you want them to. Well, that you do have to pay people for what they do, even if sometimes they stay too long. That becomes a disciplinary issue. That is not a financial issue. So that is something that you focus on when it's time for their review, or you call them into the office and you talk about it. So any questions about that? Oh, maybe not. Maybe we can move on. So the next slide, this is just kind of a vague, every state is different for where the money goes. So when you're looking at your expenses, this is where we just want to talk about this 20% figure we're bringing up. Your Social Security and Medicare, you're paying half. You're paying half of what actually goes to the government. The other half is deducted from their check. What you actually have to pay is the 7.65%. You'll have to pay state unemployment insurance in most states. Can't speak for every state. I only know in California. California, they start out new employers around 3.5%. I'm currently paying 1.6%. So it's very low. The FUTA is the federal unemployment tax, and currently they give all the states a 5.4% credit, so that you, based on a number that was 6%, so most people have to pay the 0.6. That's only on the first 7,000 that somebody makes for the year, so it really caps out at $42 an employee. I mentioned workers' comp here because it's one of those expenses that you have to pay, but it's not something that you're going to worry about every paycheck unless you are signed up with a payroll company that deducts it for you. But it actually, I put 2 to 13%. They rates vary widely, and it can be very state specific. There should be an agency in your state, if you can't find workers' comp anywhere else, that will cover everybody, because in every state but Texas is the law that you have workers' comp. In California, you have to have it with as few as 1 employee. So I was signed up with State Fund for years. I'm now with a different company. I'm paying around 3%, so it's very small. I know that some sitters in New Jersey are paying up to 13%, which is pretty high. So it's $1.30 on every $10. That does add into the cost quite a bit. My last line there, I put ETT. That's specific to California. It's an employment training tax of 0.1%. It's very small. The reason I brought that up is because your state may sneak in their little extra things too. So again, this is a general outline. This is not going to be the same for every state. Your state may be different. So I have a range in here. I took the low numbers and I took the high numbers, and it ranged from 1.18%, or excuse me, 11.8% to 25% of payroll costs that you have to add on top of your wages. So I know a lot of people, I know it's been addressed, convince me to use employees. The reason we're focusing so much on the expenses is because that is the number one thing we hear. It's too expensive. I can't make a profit if I have employees. And I'm here to tell you, I've had nothing but employees for 24 years, and I've always made a profit. I just am not paying, just to throw this in there, I have a local friend who has ICs and pays 75% to get them to work because of their tax liabilities that they have to pay. My costs round out about 55%. So anyway, so I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. And if we can go to the next slide. I did mention this before, so I really don't need to spend too much time here. But I highly encourage you to have your workers track their mileage and pay them mileage reimbursement rather than extra money in their paycheck, because it will have some really great tax ramifications for you. I think I had the numbers of my taxes in front of me. I think in 2018, I paid $21,000 in mileage reimbursements to my employees. I saved a lot of money. You know, I saved 3% of that on workers' comp right there. I think that's $600 in workers' comp because I didn't pay them as wages. I paid it as a reimbursement instead. And I saved all that 7.6% on that as well. So that is just kind of what I think it's a really important topic to bring up, and I'm happy to help people with that if they need help. And then I am, if you have any questions about that, I can answer those quickly. Otherwise, we can move on to the next slide, which is Julie's.
All right, thanks for hanging in there, you guys. We're almost done. Let's talk about overnights. So I'm sorry to say this is not something that works well with employees, because you do in most states have to pay minimum wage for their sleep time and everything, and the pricing can get out of hand. So, you know, if you try to achieve a balance that they can afford and you can cover your expenses, the profitability is low. Plus they're there for 12 hours, so your liability exposure, or 10 hours or whatever, is higher. The next slide. So check your state labor laws. I know when I first started with employees, I didn't have to pay for sleep time, but most places, I believe that has changed. And the district labor department is where you would call for that. We ask, are overnights worth it? Is it worth what you make for the increased liability? So that's something you'd have to answer. If your market allows, you may be able to attract sitters to do them as easy money for sleeping. So that way you could avoid overtime if you just found like people just to do overnights, and you would have them do like 3 in a row before they hit 40 hours. Anyway, it's a pain in the butt. Watch markets where minimum wage is higher. You may price yourself out of the market. So my minimum wage is $7.25. So I might be able to do something with overnights and make a profit and make it affordable. You can consider almost overnights as an alternative. That's where it's called, a lot of people call it bed and breakfast. The sitter goes for 2 hours at night, like 8 to 10. And then they are back there in the morning at 7:30 for a half hour for breakfast and, potty break. So if you do overnights, some other things I thought of is you could offer overnights like a sleep, but like an 8-hour overnight, 10-hour, 12-hour overnight, and then price them accordingly. They're still going to be expensive, but what can you do? With an IC, it's different. That would probably be an advantage because whatever they want with that. Is there another slide with that, or is that?
No, I think we're pretty much in the end.
Do you have anything to add about him, or that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah. On the overnights, in California, I would just want to throw out there, it is a problem because we hit overtime after 8 hours in a day, not just after 40 hours a week. And the minimum wage in California is 12 per hour, and a lot of places it's 15. Someone is saying, could you use an IC strictly for overnights? That you could try. It's just that if you're audited, are they going to look at that is the core business of your work, and probably pet care in any form, whether you stay overnight, is going to be. So it's a problem. And in California, with their recent ABC ruling, there's just no way to even have a referral business where you make a kickback, because they will call that an employee relationship. This is directly from the state labor law seminar that I attended a couple of months ago. So it can be very tricky. It's going to depend on your state whether you could use IC separately for overnights, I think. So.
Almost overnights, I don't know if we can talk specifics, how much we charge or not for those.
Yeah, that's just going to be a function, I think, of figuring out how many hours they're there and making sure you meet your wage and hour laws and a suitable profit. It's obviously going to be somewhere in between a regular visit and an overnight. You got a lot of latitude there.
As far as background checks for the questions and answers, we do all background checks on all of our new employees and paychecks. My payroll processor has a package, but there's a lot of places you can get a background check.
Oh, I see a couple more questions come up. I'm gonna
go ahead.
Oh, it was before the holiday one. Oh gosh. Overtime. Okay, well, the one I remember, holiday pay. What I do, I switched to the way because I went to hourly. I used to do, we do shorter visits on holidays. And what I used to do is pay my sitters the same and tell them they would be there shorter time, so they actually made more per hour than they normally do. Now I pay them time and a half on the holidays. But I still do the shorter visits. So they get more done per hour. I pay them more per hour, and I don't charge my clients any extra. That's a whole other bugaboo. Almost nobody does it like I do. But if you charge your client more, then that translates into your ability to pay them time and a half. I don't think there's actually, check with your state, there's really actually no law that I have to pay time and a half on Christmas or New Year's or the major holidays. Mm-hmm. I do it because people expect that, and I think it's fair. There was another question. I forget what it was. I can't quite see the questions here. Maybe
if you are paying them for drive time between visits, what happens if they get in an accident between houses?
Well, what happens as far as time? You are still obligated to pay them for all of their time. Or if there's a big traffic jam that costs a half an hour, you're still obligated to pay them for that time. It's unfortunate. If you're talking about liability, okay. Obviously, you want to have people that have car insurance, but I highly recommend also having a non-owned auto policy, and I know that BIC has one. So I carry non-owned auto so that if they were in an accident and the liability of that exceeded what their coverages were and someone were to come after my business, then I would be protected by that. If there were... there's a lot of questions coming through. So if they were injured, that would probably fall under workers' comp, or I'm not an insurance expert. It would fall probably under their car insurance, but it could be affected by your workers' comp, could be deemed as well for that. So important thing is just to make sure you have the insurance in place. How do you pay for canceled visits? My sitters don't get their schedule till like the day before. So they aren't aware of most of the cancellations that we get. When I'm paying by the hour, I simply, they get their schedule. They might have 4 walks on it. And if we get down to 3, that means they just finished up less for the day. They're paid for what they do. They are not paid for canceled visits.
Yeah, we don't pay for canceled visits unless they're in their car on the way there.
Right.
It's case by case though, different. But overall, unless a client's abusing it, so we don't charge the client and we don't pay the sitter.
I can't see all of these messages. Oh, there we go. Okay. Yes. Okay. Let me just back up a little bit to this. If you're paying hourly, for example, with no drive time or mileage, many of our clients are paying for services where we aren't going. Okay, this COVID thing is a whole different, new thing for us. Obviously, I don't know how to address clients paying for work that's not getting done. There are no wage and hour laws that are set up to deal with clients being generous and paying for things we're not doing. So that is going to have to just come from whatever you feel is the right thing to do. As far as canceled visits where someone's on the way, if my sitter gets to a house and they spend 5 minutes with the client apologizing that they don't need them today or whatever the case may be, again, it's just on their hourly timesheet. They get paid for the hours they're out working with the hourly. So you would have to figure out how to pay. If you're paying flat rate, you'll have to come up with a plan for that.
All right. I have a question for Gus.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Okay. Did you learn anything different, Gus, and how do you feel after hearing this?
Wow, I'm being called out special.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you too, Gus, because I have a few ideas.
I don't think I learned a little bit about how California's laws work and why there is a sense, especially amongst businesses in California, that they have to classify as employees. So I've learned a few things. Yes, I feel like I also have some to impart. But I really don't want to sidetrack you guys from your mission, from your goal here, which is trying to encourage people.
I have a couple questions for you, but if you don't mind, I want to answer one of these questions before because
Sure.
absolutely, because I think it's kind of important. Can the sitter deduct mileage on their taxes? See, that's the thing, is they can't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They used to be able to do that, but now they can't. So they're not going, they have no advantage to, I can write off the 10,000 miles I drove. They don't have that. So the only way they can benefit from that is you paying them the mileage. And it's an expense for you. So yeah, I think the mileage pay is kind of an important thing. But getting back to you, Gus, I know you had some reasons. I did want to mention, like I said, that the biggest reason that we find people don't want to convert is the cost. And so we really did focus on addressing that. I know that there are other reasons. Some people worry about all the legalities of firing people and getting you into trouble and wrongful termination and that sort of thing is a thing. But on the flip side, I think there's every bit as much to worry about on the IC side with that as well. What is the reason that you are not yet convinced? Because I would like to address that, and it may be dependent on where you live, but let's find out what.
Well, I'm in DC.
Okay.
First of all, when I started my company, seems like a lifetime ago, but it was in the 2000s, 2006. I did a lot of research, and it always seemed to me that I wanted not having direct oversight of people in the field. Of course, technology has progressed a lot, but not having direct oversight of people in the field and not being able to really, monitor them or have direct input into their work. At the very basic level, it seemed to me that I wanted them to have some skin in the game, that I wanted them to share in the responsibility of ensuring that they were providing, good quality care to the pets, and that they were delivering it under the provisos that were promised. I know far too many employees, having worked in the restaurant industry as a bartender, waiter, a cook in the kitchen and everything for, the 20 years prior to my starting my business, I had seen all sorts of, I don't want to, the video's being recorded, so I'm going to try and watch my mouth, but I have seen all sorts of stuff, and people not taking responsibility for their work. And I felt that pets' lives were important enough that it was really important to me that not only that I found good people who cared about the welfare of the pets and were truly vested in their welfare, but finding people who would share in the responsibility for doing that. So if they did something wrong or something happened out in the field, that their neck was also in the line. And as employees, that's very rarely, if ever, the case. There are some exceptions. And so I just wanted to make sure that was happening. And I had no way to directly look over the shoulder or not that I would want to, but I had no way of really, sort of having a part in that process when they're working out in the field, other than a quality assurance program, which we have. And like I said, there are now some technological innovations which help with that. But at the time, we didn't have that. Since then, because of the laws of workers' compensation and stuff, really the variables and all things are being equal for us versus having employees or versus independent contractors. I have always felt that most workers in our industry should be classified as dependent contractors, which is something that our country does not have. One would think that the term independent contractor would automatically imply that there is such a thing as a dependent contractor, but it doesn't exist here in the United States. Right. It does in other countries. But most workers in our industry, I believe, unless they worked in a daycare facility or something, would be classified, rightfully so, as dependent contractors. When the Obama administration came in and there was this great push, when I started my company, there was about 50-50 between contractors and employees. It may have even leaned towards contractors. But after the Obama administration, and I think rightfully so, they pursued people who are misclassifying employees as contractors. I don't feel that that was the case necessarily in our industry, but a lot of people in our industry got scared, and out of fear, not necessarily for the right reasons, but out of fear, we're forced to choose between two ill-fitting suits, and they often chose to go towards employees out of fear. And it seems to me that there's a lot of that still being promulgated, and that's a reason for a lot of people choosing one or over the other. For me, the reasons I would want to go to employees are, one, I feel like in many cases it helps to protect and provide for the employee in ways that you can't when you're utilizing contractors, vis-a-vis like health insurance or workers' compensation, but we have that. Right. And the training. So we have as provisions in our contract that they need to get Red Cross. Well, it's no longer Red Cross, but that they have to get pet CPR trained and stuff. And to be honest with you, walking dogs, unless you're like working with dogs that are with behavioral issues, there isn't like a high degree of, I wouldn't say that it's not professional, but there isn't a high degree of education that's needed to be a dog walker. Right. So for us, other than maybe wanting to continue doing training, and providing for more benefits and really looking out for the welfare of workers, there isn't much benefit to moving towards employees. For us, there are many more benefits to keeping them as contractors. I see. And I at one point had decided I was going to switch to employees back in the late 2000s, but my lawyer, my accountant, everybody advised me not to do that. And I see within our industry, though, there's still a great push to classify everyone as employees, that there seems to be a lot of like intra-industry pressure to classify people as employees. A good friend of mine who owns another company, much larger than mine, who's been in business longer than I have, and I've been in business for a while, basically said that I wasn't doing it the right, quote, unquote, way. And for me, there is no right or wrong way to do it. There are advantages and there are disadvantages to each of the choices that you might make. It's unfortunate, though, that for most people in the industry that you have to choose between two not too good options. That you're having to basically choose between the lesser of two evils. And that's what helps make differences between businesses, right? Right. We are able to offer overnights. We're able to allow our sitters to have a lot of discretion in how they do things, and allow for a lot of interaction directly between the client and the sitter. There are some things that have to go through us, but I believe in some ways we're more adaptable, and that we can find a higher level of not curated care, but care that meets the needs of the client more directly. But I see some reasons why some people would want to have employees, and in some regards, because I want to look out for the welfare of the people who we work right. with, whether they're employees or contractors. I want to be able to do that, and because of the classification system, I can't. So for me, that would be the benefit to moving to employees, and I want somebody to convince me to do that. Okay. But I have not been able to be convinced.
Okay, well, oh, you're in DC, that's right. Well, let me just address, first of all, I applaud you for covering your workers with workers' comp. In some states, some people have had difficulty. In general, you should be able to cover. Most people just don't want to, because that's one of the reasons they wanted people to be independent. And I don't want to come at this from a position of us instilling fear in people either. It's just that so much of, and I am in California. We are probably the leading state in making it difficult to use contractors. It is. It's.
You're the leading state making a lot of things difficult, but.
Oh yeah. I know. I've lived here my whole life for 60 years. I'm not going anywhere. I just have to deal with it. So we don't want to come from a place of fear, but I can tell you what's going on here, and it's. Many other states are following what happens in California. Now, I want to address a few of your points. You wanted people with skin in the game, and I do understand that. The problem is a lot of people hiring contractors aren't finding people with skin in the game. They're finding people who should be hired as employees, don't even know what an IC is, and calling them an IC.
I agree with you. And as unemployment approached 2% in DC, and as the industry has grown, finding good quality ICs has been harder.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that one should. Anyway. Go ahead.
Okay. It's just that it's really difficult to find someone who's willing to have the skin in the game and who's a true contractor, because a true contractor has their own pet sitting business.
Not necessarily. We have contractors who do have their own set of clients. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have and we have had contractors who have their own legit businesses. If you follow the guidelines in most states, and it does specify that generally a contractor has their own business. In some states, they must. That says for most, it's clients, not own business. So they are allowed to service clients whether they work for another company or whether they work for their own. They have their own clients, or whether they work for Rover or WAG. It doesn't necessarily. They don't have to have their own company. They have to be able. They can work for another company. They can have their own.
Well, we're probably talking about semantics, because some of the states, I've gone through quite a few of the requirements of states, what specifies what makes the difference, and a majority of them do say they're an independent business. And although not everywhere, I will agree with you certainly on that. I will tell you.
I disagree with you.
In the state of Colorado, there are 10 factors that you must meet to be able to use ICs. And one of them is the method of payment must be made to a business checking account. That is one of the factors. So if a person doesn't have their own business in Colorado, they're not an IC. So, this is just research I've found. So
I had a business checking account before. It seems like you want to argue with me the point of let's not. I don't think we should quibble about whether or not what makes an IC, because that varies.
Okay. Let me back up a little bit. I'm just saying in general, they do want to see an independent business. Certainly in California, I know they do. And I just think when people don't, so the skin in the game thing, if you found the right people, that is great. I'm not arguing with you at all that yours are bona fide ICs. I'm saying in general in the industry, this is one of the issues that comes up, is that a lot of people are hired who do not have the background or their own clients. In fact, sometimes they're told to sign a non-compete, which is obviously not, you cannot have that with an IC. One of the reasons
sign a non-solicitation, they're specifically allowed to compete.
Absolutely,
for obvious
but there are
reasons.
People out there that have ICs sign non-competes because they don't know better.
Well, sure, there are people with employees who don't pay their workers' comp too, but I mean, we're talking about outliers.
Right, but there are quite a few, unfortunately, that seem to have that. Now, and I know you talked about people working independently. The problem is the issue of control. One of the issues with the technology and tracking people is that can be a problem with contractors, according to what most states consider control. Having them check in on jobs, checking in and out of software. In many states, that is not compliant with using a contractor. The control issue is that the end result of the job end result is a certain expectation, but not how the job is done. So in some states, when there's technology being used to check in and out, that's a problem.
I have heard that concern as well, and I think that concern is easily. It seems like we're getting into a debate as opposed to like a debate about whether or not contractors are legitimate or not. I'll just say I think that, if I may,
sure.
I think the contractors are legitimate. I do think that there are all sorts of concerns, but most of the concerns have been brought about by this push to classify, and in some cases misclassify, people as employees when they really are legitimate contractors. My clients dictate to me, and then vis-a-vis that goes to I would not be an employee of my clients, but most of my clients dictate to me the times in which we come, just like I go when the doctor can see me. And he's definitely not my employee. So, I mean, there are concerns, and different states have their own laws and regulations, and there definitely is a push, or has been a push for the last 8 years towards classifying everybody as employees. I guess my point here is that is sometimes a misclassification, and that not to rush to make a decision based upon what is largely fear of reprisal or repercussions.
Well, you asked me to try to convince.
I said I wanted to be convinced. Yeah.
If by trying to convince you, I have to give you the reasons why I think it's a good idea, that's simply all I'm doing. The problem is that many of the reasons have to do with misclassification, but let me focus on another point then. Training. I have no desire to have people working for me that I have to tell them to go out and get training. I want to do it all myself. I want to spend hours with them. I want them to know my philosophy. There's simply, I don't know how you can do that and be in compliance. And I apologize again if my focus seems to be on compliance, but I don't make the rules.
That's not what I suggested. That's what I did not suggest that was your focus. And I agree with you on training. I said that was one of the benefits and one of the reasons I would want to switch employees, because we don't do as much training as I would like to see happen because they are not.
Yes. Okay.
I would like to comment on Gus's thing. I do agree with you, Gus, that it would be great to have some kind of middle ground. And I also applaud you for following the rules on independent contractors, and I think it's really hard to do for most people. I couldn't, like, you live in a big city where they're contracting with all different places. Where I live, there's not like other companies they can work for or contract with. So
yeah, I have a staff person or two, and I call everybody who works for a staff. Instead of we have a contractor or two who they work for 2 or 3 other businesses, and most services, I know people who use contractors and many other services that use employees. Most people don't want you working for another service, regardless if you're a contractor or an employee. But most of our contractors either have their own clients or work for another service or have.
Yeah, I get it. So Jay has asked me to kind of wrap this up in the interest of time, but I love talking about it, and I don't want to debate you or anybody, but and I do understand where you're coming from, Gus. So I think we both do. So
yes, and I applaud the way you're doing things. If everyone were, I don't think doing it like that, I don't think there would be the issues that there are. But there's just yes, there's a lot of gray areas there.
I agree with you. I wish that there has been a lot of abuse. I wouldn't say there's been any more abuse by industry than other industries, and it wasn't our industry that necessitated or sort of brought us down this road. I believe it was actually the construction industry, but I do think that there is a legitimate way to use contractors in the pet care industry, and I would like like other businesses, just want to keep myself educated and find out what's going on out there. Some part of me wishes that I would switch to employees, and there are definite reasons, which I think you guys have laid out for it. I would just want to do it for proactive reasons rather than reasons of fear.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you guys for coming. Jay, thank you for hosting this. And Jay has another thing to say before we leave.
Yeah, look, this will be in the slides. I'll make sure I provide this, but I spend most of my time working with companies from Fortune 100 to small business. And I know that COVID has been a major disruption. And there are many of you that have been impacted by that. And I spend a lot of time working with mindset on business owners. I think stagnation, resting on laurels, comfort, right? Getting comfortable often denies us the opportunity to continue to grow. I'm going to do a free training call, a complimentary training call in 2 weeks. The link on your screen, I'll make sure that this link is included in the slides that get sent out to all of you. But if you want to take a screen capture and go to it, you can just read a little bit. If you decide to get on the call with me, you can register. I'd love to have you. It's just going to be done over a teleconference. You could literally put it on speakerphone and then be able to listen in, and hopefully I add value to you and you find something of worth in there. But I do want to say to Julie and Kim, thank you. And to Kathy, I know you weren't physically able to be here with us. I know you were spiritually for sure. We are thinking of you, Kathy. But Julie and Kim, I just want you to know that I appreciate the fact you pulled a quorum together like this to share information. Gus and all of the participants, I appreciate you too. Information is power. In this case, data allows you to make an informed decision. I think you would all agree that we're often passionate about those things that work for us, those things we know best. And what you have is an opportunity to weigh everything that's been shared with you today and hopefully make a more informed decision moving forward. But thank you all for taking time out of your day to be here. Julie, Kim, anything, final thoughts from you all to the participants?
Sure, I'll go ahead. I know there were questions that didn't get answered, and I just want to let you know that feel free to contact me. I'm happy to chat with you by phone or Facebook message or email and help you out as much as I can, because the important thing here is to have the knowledge to make the decisions going forward. And there's just so much to know. So feel free, please contact me. And I know Julie feels the same way. I'll let her add her thoughts.
We're always willing to help. And it's a learning process, and it took me several years. So I know everybody's at their own place and time here. So don't take it as a judgmental thing. And thanks for attending. Really appreciate you guys attending.
Thank you, everybody. That was really, really helpful.
Thank you.
Oh, good.
Appreciate it very much.
Anytime.
Thanks, everybody. Be safe. And I usually end any of these that I do. Be safe, healthy, wealthy, and wise. I pray that for all of you. Thanks for being here. And we hope to have another one of these for you in the future when Kim and Julie and Kathy have information that they'd like to get out to all of you for some dialogue and consideration. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Jay. Appreciate
Thanks.
it.
Thank you, Jay.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, ladies.